Every time you rush to explain yourself, you look smaller. A quick apology or an instant justification tells people you're uncertain, and that uncertainty becomes the story they believe about you. In meetings, it's painfully obvious. Someone asks why a deadline slipped, and instead of saying, "First missed it," and offering a clear next step, you spill a long list of reasons. Co-workers start picking apart the excuses, managers add oversight, and suddenly you're not trusted with autonomy. In social settings, it works the same way. If a friend asks why you left early and you go into a defensive monologue, they hear weakness, not context. They feel entitled to opinions, and your choices get debated, which shrinks your space in the group. There's a simple psychological flip behind it. Explaining instantly signals you care more about convincing someone than about standing firm, and people read that as neediness or guilt, so they press, challenge, and reframe the story, which erodes your standing. That's why this matters. Small shifts, shorter answers, steadier tone, make a big difference. Conversations stop turning into interrogations, respect hangs on, manipulative follow-ups fade, and negotiations stay cleaner. A familiar moment. Why we rush to explain. People routinely blurt out explanations the moment something awkward happens. That reflex kicks in after spills, interrupted sentences, or when someone questions a decision, and it follows a quick chain. Surprise spikes your arousal, the brain hunts for a cause, and talk fills the gap. It's automatic. Your mouth moves to protect your image before you can weigh whether the extra detail will help or hurt. We do it to steer how others read us. When you give a fast reason for missing a deadline or for a comment that landed poorly, you're trying to control the narrative, showing intent, minimizing blame, and signaling that the slip wasn't who you really are. That motive makes sense. But under pressure, those explanations often sound defensive, rambling, or uncertain, and that invites doubt instead of trust. Silence feels risky in social situations. Without an immediate line from you, listeners tend to make their own story about what happened, and people rush to explain to prevent negative assumptions. Concrete examples make this plain. In a team chat where a brief message is taken as curt, or after a joke that falls flat at a party, the first reaction is usually a string of qualifiers and justifications that try to patch perception rather than address what actually went wrong. The cost appears in how others judge your competence and authority. A manager who repeatedly interrupts herself with justifications for routine choices begins to look hesitant. And in negotiations, a person who hurriedly explains concessions reveals the weakness the other side will exploit. Every extra explanation chips away at standing. In personal life, this plays out too. Long defenses for small slights tend to read as vulnerability, and that shifts the balance in conversations in small but cumulative ways. How quick explanations signal weakness. People often rush to explain themselves the moment a question or criticism lands. That instant flood of words, short, defensive, and littered with qualifiers like but and actually, signals to others that the speaker feels threatened and needs to repair an image. It reads as insecurity. In a team meeting, for example, someone who immediately gives a long excuse for a missed deadline will find colleagues zoning out and mentally reallocating trust elsewhere, because the rush to justify suggests poor planning or shaky commitment. The strange thing is that the more thorough the immediate explanation, the worse the social outcome can be. Rapid justification fills a conversational gap that curiosity and calm would otherwise occupy, making listeners suspect concealment or anxiety rather than straightforwardness. It looks like pleading. On a date, if one partner launches into a tangled account for why they were late, too many details, too many hedges, the other person often interprets that as nervousness, which lowers attraction and makes the explainer seem less self-assured. In negotiations and leadership moments, instant explanations hand power away. When a negotiator blurts out why a price is set a certain way, they reveal limits, priorities, and vulnerabilities the other side can use. The explanation becomes leverage for the counterparty instead of persuasion. Silence preserves options. Consider a salary conversation. Someone who hurriedly catalogues their financial needs and justifications gives the manager concrete footholds to push back, whereas a concise, measured rationale keeps focus on merit rather than personal entreaty. Social credibility often depends on what you don't rush to defend. Immediate defenses read as tests for acceptance, implying that approval is more important than principle, and that perception nudges people to treat you as less authoritative. Respect grows with composure. A small business owner who calmly offers a brief rationale for pricing will usually face fewer probing questions than one who launches into an over-explained justification. because composure signals control while over-explaining signals a need to be validated. Real-life patterns. Examples from work and relationships. In a weekly status meeting, tensions spike when a deadline slips. Someone asks a simple question about timing and a project lead immediately starts listing suppliers, technical hiccups, and email chains. The room tightens. Explanations like that sound defensive. People hear excuses and assume the speaker didn't plan well. As a result, decision makers interrupt more, assign oversight, and the lead loses initiative on the project. That sequence plays out at dozens of companies. The faster you justify, the faster others decide you need guarding. On Slack and in reply all emails, the pattern is even clearer. A terse note from an executive, "Why wasn't this ready?" gets back a long thread with step-by-step rationales, screenshots, and a blame trail. Other team members skim and spot inconsistencies. The sender looks less composed. Viewers mentally file the responder as reactive. In next cycles, they get CC'd on status updates, asked to share more detail, or bypassed for quieter communicators. Instant explanations here invite scrutiny rather than diffuse it. At home, late texts trigger the same scramble to explain. Running late, stuck in traffic quickly becomes 5 sentences about detours and missed turns. The partner reads it and senses over-eagerness to be believed. That breeds doubt, not reassurance. After a few episodes like that, the other person starts asking for receipts, photos, timestamps, location pings, or they simply stop trusting the account at face value. What began as an attempt to clear things up becomes a reason for closer monitoring. In interviews and negotiations, immediate rationales shrink leverage. An applicant who immediately justifies a career gap with a long story about family needs and financial strain signals vulnerability. A candidate who blurts out a salary floor by explaining bills and obligations loses bargaining power. The opposite reaction is common. The other side perceives urgency and presses. So the quick explanation changes how authority and confidence are read, and it often leads to less favorable outcomes for the explainer. The psychology behind immediate justifications. People rush to justify themselves, and that rush is already a signal. When a person immediately explains an action, listeners register not only the content of the explanation but the underlying emotion, uncertainty. Quick defenses function like bright lights on a stage. They make whatever you're defending the center of attention, and attention invites judgment. Giving an instant reason draws attention to risk or error. Say you arrive late and you start with a long explanation about traffic and trains and unavoidable delays. That explanation makes lateness stand out more than a simple sorry. The more you describe, the more details other people can pick apart, and that invites follow-up questions and skepticism. In meetings, this plays out all the time. A suggestion paired immediately with a justification prompts colleagues to probe the justification rather than accept the suggestion on its merits. People use explanations as social signals about confidence. Confident speakers tend to state decisions plainly. Hesitant speakers cushion statements with reasons, qualifiers, and hedges, which others read as doubt. For example, a manager who says we'll move forward lands differently than one who says first think we should move forward because the latter opens the floor to dissent by implying the decision is tentative. Immediate justifications also change the perceived motive behind your words. When you preemptively explain, listeners may assume you're trying to persuade or cover a flaw. In dating or negotiations, this is obvious. Offering reasons before anyone asks can come off as self-defense, and the other side responds by testing the logic. And when explanations pile up, cognitive load increases. Your story can become inconsistent, and inconsistencies erode authority faster than silence ever would. Practical alternatives that preserve respect. Questions that demand an immediate account put people on the defensive, and that reflex to justify often reads as insecurity rather than competence. It happens in meetings when a project falters and in conversations where a choice is questioned. Long explanations flood the space and leave the asker in a stronger position. That imbalance chips away at respect. A short pause changes everything. Silence gives the impression of thought, not panic. In a team discussion, waiting a beat before speaking often leads others to assume you've considered options. Then a calm clarifying question like, which part would you like more detail on? Hands the control back without sounding evasive. The cause is clear. Asking redirects the pressure and signals confidence, while instant defensiveness signals need for approval. Keep answers crisp and principle-focused whenever possible. A one-sentence rationale grounded in a clear value preserves dignity. For example, Instead of tracing every step that led to a late deliverable, say first prioritize stability over speed to avoid rework, then pause. That short line does two things. It gives a logical reason, and it sets scope so you don't tumble into a long history. People respect clarity. Rambling invites critique. When details are necessary but you're on the spot, defer with a commitment to follow up. Offer to send the specifics after you've checked facts. That shifts the interaction from an immediate trial to a managed exchange. In customer-facing situations, a quick first'll confirm the figures and get back to you keeps trust intact and prevents oversharing. The effect is practical. It preserves your standing and gives you space to prepare a stronger response. Use neutral nonverbal cues to reinforce any of these approaches. A steady tone, relaxed posture, and measured breathing support short answers and pauses. In a personal dispute, saying first will explain the full context later calmly is more respectful than an instant, emotional monologue. Body language and pacing create the impression of control, and control is what maintains status. Ever found yourself blurting out an explanation the moment someone asks why? That's the pattern we broke down. Instant justification signals uncertainty. It shifts attention from your idea to your insecurity, and it invites people to poke at your reasoning, like apologizing for being late before anyone mentions it, or over-explaining a choice in a meeting and watching colleagues start to question it. It feels safer to explain right away. But that safety has a cost. The rush to clarify reads as lower confidence, which lowers your status in the interaction and hands others control of the story, whether you're on a date, in a job interview, or leading a team. You don't need a big overhaul. Notice small shifts, a short pause, a concise answer, or a question back, and you'll often see conversations settle, people listen more, and your decisions land with more authority. You probably want practical follow-ups. If this landed for you, a like or share helps others find it, and a quick comment about where you tend to over-explain would be really useful. Next time, first'll walk through simple phrases and silent habits that let you hold space without losing influence.